This is Law of Attraction Explored. I'm Tim Grimes. If you'd like a free guide that explains the hidden link between relaxation and the law of attraction, or if you want more information about my books or my coaching, you can visit radicalcounselor.com. Enjoy the episode. So I think this is episode 50 of the podcast, or somewhere thereabouts. And that's as good a time as any to do a little bit of reflection on what we're talking about in the podcast in general, even though we really do that every episode. But in case you are new to the podcast or just haven't noticed, I generally speaking try to kind of cycle between very meditational episodes, more explorative episodes where we're investigating specific law of attraction approaches and techniques, and then episodes kind of like this one, which are more just me riffing and a little bit more just informal. And I tend to cycle between, I guess, those three patterns intentionally. And so today, to mark this 50th episode, if this is the 50th episode, I thought I would riff some about something that I think is not nearly discussed enough when it comes to spiritual practice and the law of attraction, and something that, if you are familiar with my work, you are going to immediately recognize what I'm talking about. And that primarily is irreverence, being irreverent, and having a open but irreverent sensibility. One thing that might not come across if you just know my work from this podcast is the degree of irreverence I have towards, I guess I would just say, spiritual practice in general, and certainly towards the law of attraction. In other words, I really appreciate these various teachers and teachings and what they have to offer. And at the same time, to be blunt, I don't fucking respect any of it. And I don't respect any of my own thoughts or anybody's thoughts as being all that brilliant or intelligent. I just don't think we as human beings are this amazing, spectacular, we have it all figured out thing. I think that God, or whatever label you want to put on it, is perfect, right? The deeper spiritual, universal, whatever, which I usually just label as God, I'd say that is perfect. I would say God is perfect, but humanity is inherently imperfect. And it's when we touch the God, which is what we actually are, that we become perfect. But humanity, almost by definition for me, is imperfect. And so, whenever I hear people, which I hear all the time, law of attraction, teachers and people interested in the law of attraction talking about, how we can become perfect and how everything is just great, and how, how we just have our checklist of things we want to manifest and we're just good at manifesting everything. I mean, I just, 98 out of 100 times when I hear stuff like that, I'm like, this person is just full of horse shit. Because I'm very, very, very comfortable being imperfect. A line that always sticks with me is I think, just to paraphrase it, I think Louis Buñuel, the filmmaker, the surrealist filmmaker, said it. He's like, I've always been much more interested in burning down a museum than like erecting a hospital wing. And that's my sensibility too. And that's very much like a crazy wisdom, non-dual, mystical, Zen type of sensibility, a mad poet sensibility. Where it's like, yeah, I'm more interested a lot of the time in burning down the museum than putting new pictures in the museum. That I can say that for sure. And an episode not too long ago, we had that great Socrates quote. Emma Curtis Hopkins, was just saying how Socrates said, I don't know anything. And that it seems like most people aren't comfortable admitting they don't know anything. And that's like what it's all about, I think a lot of the time. There's so much pompous bullshit. I'm full of myself. I know what the fuck I'm doing. Horse shit when it comes to these law of attraction teachings and teachers a lot of the time. There's so much pompousness. There's a lot of pretension. There's a lot of people pretending that there's some kind of enlightened spiritual being. And whenever you see that, just be like incredibly reticent. It doesn't mean you can't learn something from that person and that teacher. They might have some good advice to share. As I've mentioned before, like Osho is a great example of someone who was, any way you look at it, basically a criminal, but at the same time had some wonderful spiritual wisdom to share. But whenever you see someone putting themselves on a pedestal or other people putting a person on a pedestal, be wary, you know? Salute no man along the highway, right? This is so important, you know, and how I came to the law of attraction was from this very irreverent, not respecting any person as being special perspective. And I've always held that. That's just who I am. You know, if you see my Stop Being Serious stuff, I think that's much more clear and explicit than in some of the stuff I talk about now, where you might think that I hold certain people like Emile Coué or Joseph Murphy or H. Emily Cady in like this godlike stature. I don't hold anybody in a godlike stature, you know, and you shouldn't either, in my opinion. I mean, you're welcome to if you want to, but I think it's a fucking stupid waste of time if you do that. You got much better things to do than that. You're smarter than that. I just really dislike people being put on a pedestal, you know, and I don't like people pretending that they're special or that this is easy or that they've got everything figured out when they don't. Because the few people I've met in life who like seem to have most things figured out are humble as fuck. You know, I spoke to Jan Fraser last year, and she is somebody that I would consider, you know, she's like a pretty chill person, you know what I mean? And I just remember her telling me every day is humbling. You know, the longer that you are here on this earth, the more humbled you become. And that's a real spiritual teaching. That is God above man, not man above God. And in the law of attraction, so often it's the other way around. You know, they're using God is like the front man for a lot of law of attraction teachers. They're using God as a front man for their own human ego. And that's why there's so many charlatans and horseshitters in this field. And this might sound like wicked negative to you, to hear me use such vulgarity and irreverence when talking about these quote-unquote sacred principles, but give me a fucking break. This is a mature podcast. This is for people who want to practically improve their life on some kind of deep psychological, or we could say spiritual level. And if you're into that, you naturally are going to be a helpful and compassionate person. Like, I can swear and say things that seem pretty critical about other people sometimes because, in general, I know how to treat people pretty well. I've said some things to people on a personal level that most people could not say, that would sound terrible, but I can say them because they know where I'm coming from. Does that make me special? Fuck no. That just means I'm a good communicator. And a lot of people who are talking about these principles, especially people who are like on, you know, social media or YouTube, they're not that good communicators. They might have some interesting things to say or some interesting testimonials or inspirational stories, but to communicate the practical usefulness of these principles is rather difficult. I do the best I can. I'm not saying I'm great at it. I just do the best I can. And there's a lot of people who are very good at communicating these principles, and that's what we are exploring in this show. And we're doing it in this open, irreverent way that is unusual. Because, like, what's funny about this podcast is, like, it's not... What's funny about this podcast is it's not funny. Like, it's not humorous, really. It's not trying to be comical, you know? Like, we're not being sarcastic or jokey, usually, about these ideas, which is what, like, a lot of people do when they're irreverent. We're just talking about this stuff straight on, but at the same time, we're coming at it from this very open and non-respecter of, you know, high ideals way, where we're going to respect everybody, but at the same time, we're going to cut somebody down or cut a concept down if it just seems like it's too puffed up and too egotistical. You know, our ego gets in the way of us getting what we want. And it's really easy for that to happen for all of us, right? So we're constantly working on just checking our ego. And it's amazing, in my opinion, how many people you see talking about the law of attraction who clearly have not checked their ego enough. And again, just be aware of that. And if you feel like, Tim, you got to check your ego, that's fine. You can say that to me or think that. As I mentioned in the Law of Attraction Simplified, if just 5 or 10% of what I'm saying resonates with you, I would consider that awesome, like just wonderful, you know? And I understand I'm full of shit, right? But also understand that, in my opinion, everybody's full of shit. And at the same time, we each have stuff to share that's very valuable and helpful. And I love to rant like this and riff like this. And the reason I don't do it more is because I find that people don't even know what the fuck I'm talking about a lot of the time when I just say it like it is. You know, when I put out Stop Being Serious, that was back in 2011. And most people who saw that stuff were just like, what the fuck? They didn't even begin to understand. But the people that did understand, they really understood. And that's still what I'm like today in terms of the stuff I talk about. The law of attraction is much more applicable and easier to understand, in my opinion, than sometimes like far out spirituality or far out stress management stuff like me playing around and Stop Being Serious. Is just way out of people's comfort zones. The law of attraction is more in people's comfort zones because they think it's going to improve their life on a material level. You know, they're going to meet their ideal partner or have a better financial situation or improve their health or whatever. So that's like more practical, right, and relevant. But I'm here to tell you that that is all true. And at the same time, you cannot put people on pedestals and think they're better than you. God is great. You know, your imagination is great, if you don't want to use a religious term. Your imagination, your subconscious is great. It will help you if you work with these principles. But a lot of the time, that means that we have to be willing to burn down the museum instead of try to put more artwork in it. We have to use our irreverence because it's a very powerful and useful tool. And I always have valued my irreverence. And I think that you can express it in different ways. I've met very irreverent people who never express it verbally, but you just know their irreverence is there. And that I've met people who are very vocal about how irreverent they are. So I think it's important, and that's why I thought we would mark this perhaps 50th episode of the podcast with this theme, because we haven't really discussed it that much openly until now in the podcast. So I hope you keep on listening. I hope this was helpful. And we'll talk again soon.